Hi, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute, and I am thrilled to welcome you to this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, where each week I answer a handful of the biggest questions that we're hearing about from all over the data center ecosystem, from data center operators, technology companies, facility companies, construction, real estate investors, as well as outsourced sales and marketing companies, and from the full go to market team across sales professionals, marketers, account managers, product managers, channel partner managers, and even the executive leaders, the orchestra conductors, the aligner in chiefs that are responsible for getting the right people on the teams in the right seats, playing their instruments at the right volume in the right tempo at the exact same time. The master orchestra conductors of all of this insane amount of growth in and around data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. If this is the first time you're joining us for our weekly data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A live show, welcome. And to make sure to spread the enthusiasm, be sure to hit the like button wherever you're watching this. So, what is on the agenda for today? First up, we're going to start by looking at how to get the right person in the data center, in operations and infrastructure, how to get on their radar screen. So, how to get to the right person in data center operations and data center infrastructure. After that, we'll talk about how to generate leads for data center renewable energy with green technology and energy storage. Then we'll shift our attention to how to sell edge computing and private 5G network engagements. Next, we'll take a real quick break for a message from our sponsor. And in the second half of this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, we'll get into how to improve sales follow-ups for data center connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure, how to market and sell data center site selection, and environmental due diligence services. And as we head down the home stretch on this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show, we'll talk all about how to create go-to-market GTM for data center, IT consulting, cybersecurity, and backup recovery. To make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events and resources just like this, make sure you subscribe to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that you can sign up for, that you can subscribe for directly on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. And if you have a question, if you have a big challenge that you're facing or your team is up against or your company is up against in and around data centers, digital infrastructure, or critical facilities, we want to address that in one of our upcoming go-to-market, data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A shows. To leave that for consideration, make sure that you drop that as a comment wherever you're watching the show. So without any further delay, let's jump right into this week's first question, which is, how do we get the right person in data center operations and infrastructure to pay attention to our company? How do we get to the right person in data center operations and infrastructure? That is a fantastic question. And what that tells me is there's a lot of situational awareness that you know who these right people are. More than likely, if I go to your website and I look at your case studies section or I look at your logos, I see people, I see companies that align with the kind of companies that are going to have a well built out, mature data center operations and data center infrastructure person or teams in place. So with that in mind, to make sure that you're crystal clear about getting to the right person, being able to communicate that with other really important internal and external stakeholders who are working on that initiative, I want you to first document your ideal client profile. In other words, geographically, where are these companies located where you want to get to the right data center operations and infrastructure folks? So narrow it down. Is it global? Is it an entire continent? Is it a specific country? Is it a region or a city within that specific country? Get really, really specific on the geographic part of where these data center operations and infrastructure folks work. Second, I want you to also get really specific about their company sizes. What company is too small to afford your minimums? That's going to be the bottom end of the range for the company size that you're targeting. And what size company is so large that their data center operators and their data center infrastructure professionals are probably not the best fit for your company's current capabilities. So what's the range? What's the band? What's the minimum size? What's the maximum size? For a lot of companies in and around data centers that provide services to data center operations folks and data center infrastructure, maybe it's a minimum of 50 employees and a maximum of 5,000 employees. Or maybe it's a tighter band. Maybe it's 500 to 1,000 employees. Only you can answer that question. But I would strongly encourage you to document that in your ideal client profile that you use to get everyone on the same page on your team and throughout your company, and perhaps externally. If there's outsourced sales and marketing companies you work with or channel partners that you work with, they need to know that as well. And then finally, aside from the geographic part of that and the company size part of it, think about what industries you do best in. Are there certain vertical markets? Are there certain business models where you tend to do especially well with certain kind of data center operations professionals and data center infrastructure professionals? For a lot of business models, there's like an intersection or Venn diagram where you look at the geographic part and you look at the industry part, and that aligns with a certain set of compliance requirements or certification requirements or industry specific expertise. If you've been at this a while, you know that for certain kind of industries like healthcare or financial services or education or government, there's for sure certain compliance certification requirements that come up that either your company has or doesn't have. So that for sure should be in your ideal client profile of who's a great fit and who maybe is on the negative side of the ICP, who's an exclusion that you'd want to document there as well, because you might decide that you want certain filters in your CRM or certain inclusions or exclusions in your ad campaign or your prospecting filtering and whatever database you're using for that. There's a variety of reasons to do that, but for sure get clarity on where these data center operations and infrastructure professionals are located, how big or how small their companies are, and what industries they tend to work in. So now we have a lot of clarity at the company level. Now let's get a little more clarity on the individual people that you need to build relationships with, that you need to educate and build trust with over time, that you need to create awareness of and engage with over time. And why is this over time such a big deal? Well, if we were having this conversation like 10 years ago, it used to be that data center operations, data center infrastructure professionals would typically get to about halfway through their buyer's journey, halfway through their research and decision-making process. And at that point, they were ready to talk with someone from your company. They were ready to engage with a member of your sales team. In the 2010s, CEB, the corporate executive board that's now owned by Gartner, did research with Salesforce and SiriusDecisions, and it found that about 56% of a buyer's journey was over before vendor contact, before sales contact. Unfortunately, those days are very much in the rearview mirror. Add in 10 years of digital transformation, add in a lot of baby boomers retiring and a lot more Gen Z and millennials being in decision-making capabilities, add in millions of people working from home at the beginning of the 2020s and still continuing to work from home. And we live in a very different world where now the self-guided buyer's journey has become the predominant buyer's journey. So it used to be that you would only be shut out from these conversations in the first half. They'd get to like 56% of their decision-making process, and you would finally get invited in. So it wasn't ideal, but you still got to spend like 44% of that process with them. Those days are long gone. Gartner's latest research finds that 83% of researching and comparing options and evaluating pricing now happens without you in the room, now happens before sales contact, vendor contact. So even best case scenario, you're only getting in there for the final 17% of the game. If you're a sports fan, if you like basketball, football, baseball, imagine that you arrive at the stadium, you arrive at the arena, and they take one look at your business card, they take one look at your email signature, your LinkedIn profile, and they don't like a word that's on your job title. They're really sales allergic. And because of that, they say, You can't come in till the game's 83% over. We'll let you in the fourth quarter. We'll let you in during the eighth inning. You'd say, like, what the heck, man? My ticket is valid. We're sponsoring this game. We bought a suite and you're not letting me in till the game is almost over. What's going on here? And unfortunately, this is buyer behavior. So the way that you get in early and the way you get in often requires a new approach. We can't just show up like the same old data center technology or data center operator kind of company that we did 10 years ago. We now need to show up as more like a teacher, a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert, a consultant. And there may even be some members of your team who are able to elevate all the way to the level of being seen as a thought leader when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center operations and data center infrastructure. So with that in mind, we have our ideal client profile documented. We know about the modern self-driven buyer's journey. We know there's 28 touch points that happen between complete stranger and purchase decision. And we know by default, if we keep doing things the way we've always been doing them, we're going to be completely locked out of most of those 28 touch points. It doesn't matter how epic the Cabana party was that we sponsored in Las Vegas. It doesn't matter how amazing the celebrity fundraising golf tournament was. Those are just one or two touch points. What are we going to do to make sure that we get our way in there on another 24, 25 touch points so we have a chance for our client-facing team members to educate and build trust with the most important data center operations and infrastructure professionals that we need to build relationships with. So to get to those right people, we need to be aware of their company. We need to be aware of their mindset, and we need to get some X-ray vision to understand what's going on up here when it comes to their biggest goals and challenges. So after we prioritize and we figure out who's the most important economic stakeholder on those decision committees, we'll call them a primary buyer persona. And who's the second most important person that shows up on those decision-making committees, we'll call them the secondary buyer persona. Then we need to do some research. And we can do a little bit of this research by talking to some internal folks within our own company. You know, Bob and Sally have been in the industry forever, 20 plus years, and they have all of the answers. And sure, get input from Bob and Sally, talk to people in sales and marketing and customer success and product and channel partnerships, get their input. But I would caution you that their input should maybe be 20, 25% of the puzzle. The rest of that input, that rest of that 75, 80% of the research needs to come from looking at actual representative people who are within that prioritized or that second most important kind of buyer persona. And in a perfect world, we want to do face-to-face interviews. The second best, video conference interviews. Fire up the Zoom and book some 15, 20-minute meetings, incentivize them if you need to, and get answers to those biggest questions so you understand their biggest goals and their challenges and where they hang out online and offline. And most of all, we need that information in their own words. Not what we think those words are, not what Bob and Sally told you those words are, but what the actual people told you those actual words are. We can't guess, because if we guess, there's a really good chance that our messaging is going to fall completely flat. And the words, the copywriting, the headline on our websites, on our product marketing, on our sales enablement, on our educational resources, on our events, everything needs to be aligned with our prioritized buyer persona's biggest goals and challenges in their own words. So again, ideally, face-to-face interviews, second best video conference interviews. If you can't get access to any of that, surveys are not a bad consolation prize, using notes and documents and emails that you find in your CRM, your customer relationship management system. LinkedIn can also be phenomenal with that. So at the minimum, look at 10 or 20 people that fit that particular buyer persona and see how they describe themselves. See what kind of content they share, see who they interact with, what groups they belong to, skills they're endorsed for. And from there, you should be able to come up with a reasonable approximation in their own words of their biggest goals and challenges. Once you have that documented, and when you do this right, it's more than likely going to be a couple of pages of details on each of these buyer personas. That actual research becomes the basis of everything that you do going forward with your messaging, with your marketing, with your sales enablement, with your product marketing, with your website copywriting, with your events priorities. So your content calendar, your editorial calendar, your events calendar, what you're going to title your events, the topics you're going to talk about at your events, the copywriting for your event registration landing pages. Everything is going to come out of those documents that are incredibly important, that are based on research. This is how you get to the right person in data center operations. And this is how you get to the right person in data center infrastructure. Because at the risk of using the word get way too often, you need to demonstrate that you get, that you understand, that you fully comprehend what's going on in their world. And the way we figure out what's going on in their world and how we make sure that we resonate with what's going on in their world is we do our homework. So when we show up and we invite them to these educational events and we share these educational resources, we're using their exact words of what's top of mind, of how we can help them professionally achieve their goals, how we can help their team achieve their goals, how we can help their company achieve their goals, how we can help them address the biggest stressors and challenges that they're currently facing, that are driving them nuts, that are messing up their work-life balance, that are compromising their ability to unplug and enjoy time with friends and loved ones, that are messing up vacations and potentially threatening their career trajectory. So once we have all that in mind, we're in a great position to prioritize what we want to talk about that intersects with what they care about and what we care about. And I get, from a realistic standpoint, that your chief revenue officer, your chief commercial officer, your sales directors, you want to talk about what you're trying to sell, what you're trying to close. The reality is 95% of the people out there are not ready for that sales conversation, but could be very, very ready for a sales conversation like that a couple of weeks, a couple of months down the road. The problem is, if all you talk about is proposing marriage, when everyone wants to go on a first date and a second date and a third date and enjoy courtship and let the relationship nurture and evolve over time, it's a funny romantic comedy when Ashton Kutcher says, gee, wouldn't it be cool if we got married on the first date? But when it comes to data center operations professionals and data center infrastructure professionals, they're a pretty technical group. You could say they're a pretty cynical group. They're not big fans of marketing and sales. So in order for us to show up in a way that we can earn their trust, it's got to be done on their terms, and it's got to be done over time. This is why so many of your sales professionals will find that going forward, there are job titles that are going to be much better synonyms and much better ways of positioning than account executive or sales development or business development kind of rep. Consultant, thought leader, trusted advisor. There's so many different ways of approaching it. The challenge is the mindset. The culture needs to start at the top. And for so many companies, the culture is stuck in the 2010s. So if your company has anywhere from a few dozen to a few hundred employees, someone at the most senior levels of leadership in your company needs to wake up one day and proclaim that we are tired of being treated like crap by our customers and clients. We're tired of being competed into threadbare margins that threaten the survival of our company. We're tired of being talked down to. We're better than that. We want to be known going forward as the be-all, end-all experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center operations and data center infrastructure. And we're going to make it the number one priority going forward for the data center, for the digital infrastructure, for the critical facilities ecosystems, to know that our company and our team members are the number one experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center operations and data center infrastructure. And we're going to realign our investments to fully support that. And when you do that, it will have a game-changing impact. But if you're still running the sales and marketing playbook the same way that you have for the last 10 years, it's painful. Because the reality is, look, I'm Gen X. And the baby boomers that I know that still work full-time or part-time in this business, the ones that are still around use LinkedIn nearly every single day. They attend webinars. They speak at webinars. They're interviewed on podcasts. They listen to podcasts. They're watching educational content on YouTube and on LinkedIn. They participate in LinkedIn groups. And of course, they're going to the same events and conferences that they have since decades past. So if you think you're marketing to this person that is digitally resistant, I don't know who you think you're marketing to. Do your homework, do your buyer persona research, figure out not only what their biggest goals and challenges are, but where they learn, their watering holes, their favorite online resources, their favorite offline resources, and make sure that you're aligning and showing up where they show up. That is the key to getting to the right person in data center operations and data center infrastructure. Next question up is, by the way, if you're getting good value so far from the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show, make sure that you hit the like button. So next question up is, how do we generate leads for data center renewable energy with green technology and energy storage? How do we generate leads for data center renewable energy with green technology and energy storage? So your company basically wants to exert extreme topical leadership on renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage in and around data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. So that sounds like a big ocean to boil. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is let's get a little more specific. Let's figure out who are the right companies. Let's get really specific about who the right companies are. Can you realistically sell renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage to every data center, critical facility, and digital infrastructure related company on the planet? Or are you best suited to do this on a particular continent or in a particular country or group of countries or a specific region within a certain country? So let's get that out of the way. Second, are all companies created equal when it comes to future clients for your company? In other words, can the largest Fortune 500 companies, can the largest hyperscalers on the planet get good value from your renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage? Are you really, really, really well equipped to sell to massive hyperscalers? Or is your sweet spot a little bit smaller than that? And at the other extreme, how big does a company need to be to afford your minimums for renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage? Do they need to be at least a couple million in revenue or annual turnover? Do they need to have at least a few dozen employees? So let's dial in our Goldilocks here. Not too hot, not too cold, not too big, not too small. Let's make sure that we know a very specific range, company size-wise, of who's a great fit for your renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage. And then let's also get really specific about the business models, the industries, the verticals where we play best. Are there certain industries that are especially well suited for what you do at the intersection of renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage? Are there certain industries that are especially bad fits? Get that documented as well. And from that ideal client profile that has your geographic, company size targeting information, industry targeting information, from there, you should be able to research and build out a target account list. That's going to power your account-based marketing, your ABM, your account-based selling, your outbounds, your ads, whatever you want to call it. So that's going to help you zero in on the right kinds of companies that you want as leads for your data center, renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage. Then let's talk about the people within the company that are the right kinds of leads. And a lot of the job titles, a lot of the roles are going to vary depending on how big or small or how expansive your product roadmap is, your products and services that you provide for renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage, as well as how big or how small their companies are. The bigger the enterprise that you're selling to, the more likely it is that you're going to have much more specialized roles. The smaller the company is, it's possible you're literally selling to a CTO or a data center manager or something that's that broad and expansive where they're wearing a ridiculous amount of hats because there's a couple dozen employees in that particular company. So we need to dial in. That's why it's so important to dial in not only the geography, but the size, as well as the industries, the business models for your lead generation. So let's say when it comes to renewable energy with green technology and energy storage, There's probably an ESG executive. There's probably a sustainability officer. There could be an energy manager. There could be a facilities director. There could be an infrastructure person. A lot depends, again, on your capabilities, whether you tend to sell more to a facilities professional or more to a technology professional. On this is probably a lot more leaning to the facilities person than the technology professional. And it will also, who these prioritized buyer personas are, will also heavily depend on how big or small this particular company is, how many locations they have. Are they spread across geographies, spread across time zones, spread across different nations and continents potentially? So let's get dialed into not only the company and getting your ideal client profile right, but who the people are that are most important that we educate and build trust with. So let's say in this particular example, we're talking about a ESG officer as well as a facilities manager, that maybe your primary and your secondary person on your decision-making committee. For the ESG exec, and for the facilities person, we need to do some research. We need to understand what's going on in their world, what their biggest goals and challenges are at the intersection of things like green technology, renewable energy, and energy storage. And the way we're going to do that is we'll get some input from our internal stakeholders, the people that are within your company that have been doing this forever, that for sure think they have all of the answers. And we know they have a lot of the answers, but I would also caution you when it comes to doing this customer insight research to take your internal input and maybe weight it at about 20 or 25% of the overall research. 75, 80% of the research should come from external conversations with the ESG folks, with the facilities directors, with whoever else is typically on the decision-making committee. When you look at your case study clients, when you look at your CRM of where you've been most successful, we need to understand the consensus on their biggest goals and their biggest challenges in their own words. Not what we think those words are, but what those words actually are. Because getting that language right, getting the terminology, getting the jargon right is incredibly important for making sure that our website content, our copywriting, our product marketing, our sales enablement, our outbound emails, our ads, our events, our messaging, our landing pages. If you don't have clarity on their biggest goals and challenges in their own words, there's a really good chance that some or all of your messaging could fall completely flat. And that's going to be the opposite of giving you what you need to generate leads. So we need to get their exact words. We need to get the consensus on what the biggest goal is, what the biggest challenge is, because we're going to lead with that. And then over time, we're going to test all of the goals and all of the challenges to see what resonates best at different parts of the buyer's journey with different kinds of lead generation offers. What kind of lead generation offers work well? Well, you need to contextualize for who they are and where they are in their relationship with your company. What we should keep in mind with all of this is we now live in a world where most of the research and decision-making and comparing of options is happening without you in the room. They don't want to talk to vendors for the most part until they're just about ready to buy. Gartner found that like 83% of a typical buyer's journey is over before a vendor contact. So even in the best case scenario, you're only in there for the final 17% of this process. How do we get in there for the first 83%? Is it another golf tournament? Is it another cabana party? If only. No, we need to educate and build trust. And the way we do that is we show up in a way that really demonstrates that we understand what's going on in their world, what the ESG executive, what the facilities director is facing for their professional goals, for their team's goals, for their company's goals, for their biggest stressors, their biggest challenges, what's driving them nuts. And the better job we can do to insert ourselves into what is already going on in their mind, the more we're going to be welcomed in, the more time they're going to want to spend with client-facing team members from your company. The more you ignore that and the more you keep proposing marriage on the first date, hey, what's it going to take to close you today into some renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage, the more you sound like a car salesperson, an obnoxious car salesperson that wants to elope on the first date, the more you're repulsing them, the less time they're going to want to spend with you. So does every AE, does every account executive, does every sales development rep who is involved in renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage need to immediately go out and find a better job title synonym for their business card, for their email signature, for their LinkedIn profile? And it's certainly part of it. If you want your prospects and clients to want to spend time with you, one of the best ways to do this is to offer value in a way that seems so good that it feels like free consulting, an elite world-class kind of free consulting, the kind that they would get for $500 or $1,000 an hour or your local currency equivalent if they engaged like EY or PwC or Deloitte or KPMG or something like that. It should be that good, that valuable. And this is a very, very different way of selling than as recently as 5-10 years ago. The enterprise account executive of today should feel a lot more like they're running project management to help the internal champion drive alignment across the decision committee, a lot less focused on just getting the deal closed. So from a practical standpoint, some of the best lead generation opportunities for you to spend as many of those 28 touch points as possible with them throughout their awareness and the consideration stages are when you have a chance to really, really impact the decision-making criteria that's being set. Some of the best lead generation opportunities center around events, educational events. This isn't a booth at a conference. This is teaching people how to look at your category at the intersection of what they care most about. So if you're targeting, for example, hyperscalers, or you're targeting facilities directors of manufacturing companies with their own data centers, whoever you're targeting, once you get the consensus on their biggest goals and challenges at the intersection of green tech and energy storage and renewable energy, your events calendar, the titles of these events, the bullet points, the copywriting, what you plan to teach and educate them about should be very focused on what is top of mind for them. There could be a natural call to action opportunity at the end of that event or at the middle of the event for people that want to learn more about how your company could potentially help them. But early on, they just know that they have a big goal. They just have some big challenges that they're trying to figure out. And the more you can show up as a helpful expert, as a teacher, as a consultant, as a trusted advisor, the better off you're going to be at generating super high quality leads. Because when it comes to those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision, the companies that spend the most time with the prospects and clients are going to win. When you spend multiple touch points, adding a ton of value throughout the full journey, you're nearly guaranteed to stay on the short list. When you do this at an elite world-class level, you will dominate the shortlist to the point that your competitors will disappear from the shortlist. That gets rid of price sensitivity, right? In a lot of situations. So if you are serious about generating leads for data center renewable energy with green technology and energy storage, get really plugged into how they now research and compare options and evaluate pricing, get really plugged into what companies are the best fit and who are the key people on the decision-making committee that you need to educate and build trust with. Then get inside their head, figure out what's going on in their world in a way that you can add value. If you're concerned that you don't have enough team members internally who can walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to educating and building trust on renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage, this will change going forward the kinds of candidates that you choose to recruit and hire. This will change what professional development looks like and upskilling and reskilling looks like within your own team members. This will change how you make these investments in cross-training over time and how you get people involved in different kinds of roles. But at the absolute minimum, you can always go and hire external consultants and subject matter experts to work with your company as an extension of your company to slot into these roles. You almost certainly can lean into existing vendors that you do business with and see if you can get their subject matter experts to come in and speak with your clients. But for sure, educating and building trust is the single most important unlock for getting these great leads, for generating these great leads going forward. So the question is your company culture aligned around making the industry acutely aware that your company is the be-all, end-all expert when it comes to anything and everything to do with renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage? And are you running a playbook that's aligned with how modern buyers in these categories are going to research and navigate these purchase decisions? Or is your playbook clinging to an outdated model from 10 years ago when you were a lot more in the driver's seat? So if you're serious about differentiated growth, if you're serious about improving your competitive positioning, if you're serious about being a thought leader and driving meaningful sales cycle acceleration without compromising your margins and being able to close on your own terms, it's incredibly important that your lead generation strategy align with ways that add enormous amounts of value throughout the full buyer's journey with your most important prioritized buyer personas for data center renewable energy, green technology, and energy storage. Next question up is, oh, this one's really, really timely. How do we sell edge computing and private 5G network engagements? How can our company sell edge computing and private 5G network engagements? Yeah, this for sure is a really, really big one. And a lot of what is driving this growth is AI tends to be very latency centric. EVs are very latency centric. Smart cities are incredibly latency centric. So, in other words, the closer, the better. And what's interesting with all of that is there's this general trend in a few parts of the world right now where sustainability is driving some edge adoption needs as well. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you go back 5 or 10 years ago, hyperscalers would frequently place these huge facilities kind of in the middle of nowhere where land was readily available, where low-cost energy was available. And it would be good for pricing and unit economics and competing co-location businesses out of the off the radar screen with driving their cost to very low levels. So what's happened with that, however, is as grid power availability has dwindled to next to nothing in so many regions of the world, and that tends to be one of the bigger data center development constraints with site selection, where to locate these facilities. There's now a movement that I think is strongest in the Nordics, in Northern Europe and Scandinavia, and throughout parts of Europe, and is starting to spread to Asia, and I think is going to end up spreading in a lot of regions. And a lot of this data center sustainability movement is anchored in heat reuse. What heat reuse means is if you think about the average temperature from a AI intensive, high performance computing intensive data center that comes from the heat that's generated inside, they're basically figuring out ways to take that excess heat and pump that out to their next door neighbors, to a building that's adjacent to the data center. So you can get, for all intents and purposes, free heating for several months of the year, perhaps year round, depending on the climate that you're located in and how efficient you're using this with. So could it be used to heat an office building? For sure. Could it be used to heat an apartment building or condominium? Absolutely. Could it be used to hot water for hot showers, for a swimming pool? Absolutely. All these use cases are already starting to be implemented in multiple places throughout Europe, and this is going to spread in multiple places throughout the globe as grid power becomes an enormous constraint. In order for this to work, there's got to be incredibly high levels of coordination between data center developers and city planners, urban planners, data center construction companies, data center operators, and the adjacent projects. What this means is this movement from centralized to decentralized data centers, where you have a lot smaller data centers that are located much closer to someone that can benefit from the heat reuse, is definitely coming into favor. Along the same lines, when we look at a lot of these smaller, specifically located data centers, you also have an opportunity to pick up some edge benefits, some proximity benefits, because again, you don't have this monstrous hyperscale facility out in the middle of nowhere. So it helps for sure with latency. In some cases, this can help as well. You know, it's interesting. A lot of people come to me and ask for advice, and like they have these legacy co-location facilities that were built. Legacy is all relative, but it could be as little as 5 years ago, before OpenAI, before NVIDIA. All this stuff really, really took off like a rocket, and the needs for much stronger density in the racks and liquid cooling really came to bear. So now you have these legacy co-location facilities. What do you do with them? Well, in a lot of cases, they can run non-GPU workloads. And they also have a lot of advantages that they could be potentially repurposed for edge, because they're locations all of a sudden matter, even if they can't support a massive amount of power with these AI-driven and high-performance computing-driven, supercomputing-driven kind of workloads. So I would take all of that into account as you're thinking about your company's big picture strategy, as you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy for edge computing and private 5G networks. What it really comes down to is how tightly integrated your products and services are with each other. Are you really selling your edge computing solutions and private 5G to the exact same clients, or are they two different kind of clients? If you're fortunate enough that you have a really cohesive roadmap, you probably have really healthy hopefully have really healthy unit economics, and you can benefit from a single unified go-to-market strategy around this, a GTM around this, and a single marketing playbook, a single sales playbook, a single sales team that supports all of this. So what we're trying to essentially do is we know where our locations are, and we need really two different kinds of playbooks. And this is a very similar kind of issue that co-location operators have faced and continue to face. So when it comes to edge computing and private 5G networks, you have the potential buyers, the IT buyers, the operator buyers, whoever you think is a perfect buyer for your edge computing and 5G network, private 5G network services. You have people that are located in extremely close proximity to these edge locations. So the question is, do these edge locations actually have a whole full-blown facility? Do they have like a conference room? Is there a classroom attached to it? If so, I would encourage you to think about creating educational events that you host in those facilities where you have your edge computing and private 5G network facilities, and 12 to 24 times a year, rotate in having these fantastic educational events for your most important buyer personas. How do you know what these topics should be? What do you talk about? These are your buyer personas. You go out and you do the research and you figure out the IT infrastructure, the telecommunications folks, the data center managers, the infrastructure engineers, whoever it is that you're targeting in the local area that you want to know about how fantastic your edge computing and private 5G network solutions are. You go out and you build your ideal client profile and your target account list and figure out who the key people are in these companies. And 12 times a year, you invite those folks to come down for a fantastic breakfast seminar or lunch and learn event or symposia or a networking event. And you go out of your way to bend over backwards for them to get enormous value from attending that local educational event on a topic that is top of mind for that group of people. And in a perfect scenario, let's say your conference room, your classroom holds 20 people. I'd love to see you have 2 to 4 of those seats taken up by your existing clients who love what your company does when it comes to edge computing and private 5G networks, because their enthusiasm, their social proof will spread to everyone else in the room. And the other 80% of the seats ideally are people that are your prioritized buyer personas sitting on your target account list that fit right in the bullseye of your ideal client profile. If you are not fortunate enough to have a great classroom or a great conference room or a foyer or something like that where you can hold these events 12 to 24 times a year, look for a place that's nearby. It could be a restaurant, it could be a co-working facility, it could be something similar where you can rent relatively inexpensive space. If you have to, you could potentially go to a hotel for that, but the $7 coffees or your local equivalent get pretty expensive pretty quickly and kind of is a buzzkill when it comes to doing these small grassroots events. But if you have the ability to host these events, by all means, go full steam ahead and have 12 or 24 of these great events a year. Where do the 24 events come from? Your buyer personas, your primary buyer persona, separate event from your secondary buyer persona. Because if you get your segmentation and your personalization right, you'll discover that they care about different issues. So that's your hyperlocal playbook for your edge computing and your private 5G networks. What about beyond hyperlocal? What about people that can't get to your facility within a half hour, an hour drive? Well, that's a national audience. That's potentially a global audience. And that requires taking a lot of what you're figuring out about your buyer personas and building a playbook for selling edge and selling private 5G on a global basis to people that generally can't come in to get a tour and come in to a physical offline kind of event. And in a lot of ways, you should be able to repurpose what you're doing locally in digital formats. So if you're hosting these great educational events, for sure, you'll have some great slides. You have a videographer, you record it, You live stream it, and then you have online events. You have online webinars. You have live streaming events. You record those. You make those available on demand. You recognize that, yep, a lot of people will watch the full 50-minute educational event, but for many people that have ADD, I'm going to be doing well if I can get them to watch a couple of segments of that event that might be 3 to 7 minute long. So you have segments from there. Those are usually a natural fit for blog posts. And then for the people that have extreme ADD, they may first discover your great educational content about edge computing and private 5G because they watched a 37-second YouTube short or a LinkedIn video version of that, or on TikTok or Instagram or wherever. Right? For most buyer personas that are relevant to companies in and around edge computing and private 5G, you will probably find that your buyer personas are heavily concentrated, their energy, their attention on LinkedIn and YouTube when it comes to where they spend their professional day for researching and learning about topics that are top of mind. But again, there's this hyper-local playbook where you can have FaceTime, and not FaceTime like Apple, but where people come to physical offline events and educational events like lunch and learns, breakfast seminars, shockingly inexpensive to be able to host these, and not incredibly difficult to do if you already have a great email database and LinkedIn reach with people that you're trying to educate and build trust with over time. And then there's also a global version of that. The global version of it is someone knows that they're looking for edge and private 5G in your region at your particular location, and we need to be able to reach those folks. So we take similar kind of content, and then we do things like search optimize it, video optimize it. We use outbound, we use ads, we use everything in the playbook to get to more of the right people on a global basis to be able to deliver the same content that educates and builds trust and has a natural call to action for something that's more late stage, that's more bottom of the funnel, that's more salesy, like a free needs assessment, a free consultation, schedule a tour, something like that. Obviously, scheduling a tour, again, is most relevant for people that are in the local area. Scheduling a virtual tour is relevant to your long distance prospects and clients for edge computing and private 5G network engagement. So taking into account what's going on with today's self-driven buyer's journey and who the most likely buyer personas are for your company's edge computing and private 5G networks, that is how I would approach building a go-to-market strategy, building a marketing and sales playbook for a differentiated, competitively positioned way of selling edge computing and private 5G network engagements. We're going to take a real quick break for a message from our sponsor, and we'll be back with 3 more great questions on this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. Oh, by the way, before we jump out, if you're getting good value from this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A, make sure that you hit the like button to help spread that enthusiasm to other folks in your network.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales marketing and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com. Now, back to Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A.
Hey, it's Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. We are all about elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market professionals in the growth of the data center industry. And you are watching our weekly live Q&A show, the Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A. So what is up on the agenda next? We're going to talk about how can we improve sales follow-ups for data center connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure. How do we improve? How do we upgrade? How do we enhance our sales-related follow-ups for data center connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure? So the first question that we need to get clear is your company able to sell connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure to the exact same clients, or are these 4 different kinds of clients? For the business model that is most likely to have asked this question, you more than likely are selling all 4 or 2 or more of these to the exact same clients. For a much larger company or a company that's been built through acquisition where there's not quite as tight of integration yet across these lines of business, it's possible that for a while You may maintain more than one brand or have more than one go-to-market strategy, more than one marketing strategy, more than one sales team. However, if your company's been established for a while and you're way past the stage of having product market fit and go-to-market fit, and your case studies show a very similar profile of 2, 3, 4 different kinds of companies that you historically have been successful with, that drives a really consistent way of documenting your ideal client profile and documenting and prioritizing your buyer personas. As long as all of that is in place, we're going to have a pretty strong degree of confidence that your account executives, your sales development reps are selling data center connectivity and cabling and power and infrastructure to the exact same kinds of clients, the exact same ideal client profile, the exact same target account list, the exact same kinds of buyer personas. So the biggest overall priority that I would make for improving your follow-ups is getting really dialed into who they are and what they care about, and showing up in a way that adds value to their lives. There's way too many people in the kinds of business models that are selling connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure that are selling kind of like car salespeople. And that's not a good look. Especially not for today's hyper cynical technical buyers, IT professionals, infrastructure professionals, low voltage professionals that work in IT organizations that have their own data centers, or in data center operators that are making these decisions around connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure. So how do we show up in a way that we are inviting, that we're encouraging these folks to want to spend time with us, as opposed to us chasing them and feeling like, we're begging for attention? The way we do that is we get really, really dialed into what they care about. So after we're really clear who these companies are, and we've documented the heck out of this in the ideal client profile, we need to get really clear about who the decision committee folks are that we need to educate and build trust with. And the educating and building trust with is such a different mindset from how so many people currently sell connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure, because we now live in this world where most of your best buyers have become extremely sales allergic. They just don't want to spend time with sales professionals and vendors until they're almost ready to buy. This is a really big change from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, buyers were somewhat empowered, but you still could count on the fact that most of your buyers were going to spend about half of their buyer's journey with your sales team. Today, that's completely different. A lot of baby boomers have retired. The baby boomers that are still in the workforce, part-time and full-time, are totally plugged into using digital tools. They're active on LinkedIn. They attend webinars. They speak at webinars. They listen to podcasts. They watch podcasts. They speak at events. They're very digitally savvy. So the reality is, between millions of people working from home at the beginning of the 2020s during the pandemic, and continuing to work from home, and 10 years of digital transformation, and a lot more Gen Z, a lot more millennials in decision-making roles, we now live in this world that Gartner best describes as 83% of the buyer's journey being over before vendor contact, before they're open to meeting someone from your sales team. 83%. So even if you do everything perfectly, best case scenario, you're only in there for the final 17% of the research and decision-making process. And there's 28 touch points that are going to happen between complete stranger and purchase decision. If we keep doing things the way we've always been doing, we're going to be locked out of most of those 28 touch points. And someone else, our competition, are going to have a chance to stack the decks in their favor. They're going to shape the criteria that heavily frames the purchase criteria around their company. And we can't allow that to happen. So in order for us to prevent that, in many cases, these are big company culture changes. If your company has a couple dozen or fewer employees, or even as many as a few hundred employees, this is such a big culture change that it usually needs to start at the CEO level. If you work in a true enterprise that has thousands or tens of thousands of employees, could be a chief revenue officer or a chief commercial officer or something like that, that becomes the internal champion at this initiative. But for any companies that are smaller than that, this is such a big deal for a company culture change that it needs to come all the way down from your CEO. And your CEO, you need to get to the point where, like, look, we know we're the best in our space for certain kinds of companies that are certain size in certain kind of regions when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure. But the marketplace doesn't know that. And because of that, a lot of our clients are treating us like crap. They're ghosting us. They're marginalizing us. They're sticking us in the vendor box. We're being forced to beg for attention. We're being forced to compete on price that's destroying our margins and putting our company's survival at risk. And we can't let that happen because we know we have some really, really, really smart people internally. Now it's time to let the world know about that. And we're going to put our flag in the ground. We're going to let it be known that going forward, our company is the world-class top subject matter experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure in our particular geographic region for companies of a certain size in certain kind of industries with certain kinds of stakeholders that are involved in these kinds of initiatives. And when we get that hyper specific and that committed to changing the status quo, amazing things can happen. But these are really, really big culture changes. And in order to affect these changes going forward, a lot of members of your sales team are going to need to reposition themselves to be seen a lot less like transaction-focused, quota-hungry salespeople, and a lot more coming across and positioning like trusted advisors, like consultants, like teachers, like subject matter experts. And the most senior members of your team will even need to be positioned as thought leaders in your space. And the number one way from a tactical perspective to make this happen is to not only get super specific on your target account list, on your account-based marketing, get super specific about your segmentation and how you personalize and segment those leads and continue to evolve that over time. But when you do that, educational resources and educational events becomes your best friend. The definitive guide to what everyone needs to know about data center connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure. But instead of replacing everyone, we're going to come up with what every mid-market CTO or network infrastructure engineer, data center infrastructure, whatever it is, that particular role in that particular company, that particular region, what you need to know about. And that's kind of the message with all of this going forward, is when you have a really strong idea of your most important stakeholders, biggest goals and challenges, everything going forward after you've documented those done the research and documented those buyer personas, all of your website messaging, all of your email copywriting, all of your social posts, all of your sales enablement, all your product marketing, all of your educational events calendar, your educational events titles, the headlines, the copywriting, the bullet points, all of that going forward needs to lean into what their biggest goals are and what their biggest challenges are in their own words. Not what we think those words are, but what those words actually are, because we have done our homework. So in terms of sales follow-ups, the most impactful sales follow-up on the planet for winning in data center connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure is getting your ideal prospects and your ideal clients to spend more time with your team in an educational, trust-building kind of context. Webinars, lunch and learns, breakfast seminars, symposias, anything that you can do to get your ideal clients and the most important stakeholders in those companies to want to spend time with members of your team is going to be a huge win going forward. Lather, rinse, repeat. This is the ultimate sales follow-up, and there will be members of your sales team that just aren't strong enough technically in connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure to truly be able to pull off being a consultant, a subject matter expert, a teacher, or a trusted advisor. That's okay. You need tour guides, you need concierges, you need moderators. Sure, don't throw someone into a deep end when they just joined your company a couple of weeks ago, but even a sales development rep who's been in your space at your company for 6, 12, 18 months could have a really strong positive role in being the tour guide and being the moderator and being the concierge with these great educational events. The more seasoned members of your team will be able to take a more technical kind of subject matter expert consultant kind of role. And you'll pair them up potentially with other external subject matter experts. They could be channel partners, they could be clients, they could be other companies that you do business with. Again, it's all about delivering strong educational value in the eye of the beholders, in the eye of your most important subject matter experts to pull this off. That's the most amazing sales follow-up on the planet, because they're going to want to spend time with members of your team in this context. And then it becomes a supernatural call to action to say that, oh, hey, Bob, great to see that you registered for our Cybersecurity 101 for FinTech data center engineers, whatever it is that we're hosting next week. But we know that it truly takes a village. There's typically people from this role, this job function, that job title, whatever, that are typically involved in these kinds of programs. So with that in mind, who else should attend our Lunch and Learn? Just simply hit the forward button, add a thought or two about why this matters, and make sure that your colleagues, your co-workers know about this. So when you talk about starting to gradually drive alignment across the full decision committee, mastering this account-based marketing, your educational events, whether they're in person or whether they're webinars, can be amazingly impactful when you start to see multiple stakeholders from the same company attending together. It sounds a little cliched, but people that learn together grow together. And one of the biggest challenges we know when it comes to anything and everything having to do with digital transformation, even connectivity, cabling, power, and infrastructure, is driving alignment across multiple people on a particular team and across multiple teams. And your educational content, your educational events can be an amazingly powerful vehicle for, I hate to use the word indoctrination, but getting everyone educated and on the same page and seeing the world, seeing the ecosystem, seeing these issues the way that you do, because the more time they spend with you, the more likely it is that they're going to be receptive to how you help them frame this whole initiative, how they evaluate all of the options in front of them. And the more of those 28 touch points that they spend with you, the more likely it is that you're guaranteed to stay on the short list. And the more likely it is that these educational events have such an enormous impact that they start to knock competitors off the short list, out of the consideration set, because they're spending so much time with you and they feel so little time to look elsewhere for this educational content, for these educational experiences, that many times you're winning by default by the time they're in market, by the time they're ready for that sales related conversation. So that's the number one way that I would improve sales follow-ups going forward for connectivity, for cabling, for power and infrastructure, is do a radical makeover of your go-to-market approach, your sales and marketing approach, so that your AEs, your account executives, your sales development reps, your business development reps come across a lot more like teachers, consultants, subject matter experts, and trusted advisors, so that your best prospects or your best clients actually want to spend time with members of your client-facing team. Okay, next question up is, let's take a quick look at this. Cool, we got a great question, so we'll add that to the queue to address in an upcoming episode. Yeah, by the way, if you have an idea for a sales and marketing challenge that you're currently facing in your data center related business, by all means, feel free to share that in the comments and we'll get that in the queue to address in a upcoming data center go-to-market sales and marketing Q&A episode. So next question up is, how do we market and sell data center site selection and environmental due diligence services? This is very, very top of mind, because in so many regions around the US and in so many regions around the world, there is an enormous amount of pushback now from elected officials, from regulators, from activists, from utility companies against data center development. So it's coming more into focus than ever that there is a massively important role that's played by data center site selection experts and companies that are able to do environmental due diligence services. So how do we build a playbook for marketing and selling data center site selection and environmental due diligence services? I think a lot of this is recognizing that this is a very long game, and the upside and the downs, there's so much at stake. These, in most cases, in most regions of the world, these are 8 and 9 figure projects. There's enormous amounts that are being invested in capital in developing these data center facilities, especially these hyperscale facilities, and many, many geographies around the world. So the companies that are able to win these very early stage site selection work and win the environmental due diligence services, there's so much at stake. But it is very much, in many cases, you're dealing with extremely cynical, highly fragmented silos. And one of the best ways for you to slowly but surely win over the different stakeholders that are going to decide who they hire for site selection and environmental due diligence is to recognize that different stakeholders care about completely different issues. You may think that the data center investor, the data center developer, is your most important stakeholder, and they could be, but it's also very, very likely that you will need to have street credibility with some of these external community kind of stakeholders that played a relatively important role over the last decade, but now play an incredibly heightened role because so many communities are pushing back and saying, no more data centers. So we need a way to be able to elevate our professional expertise so that there's a certain amount of professional respect and and they understand all of the issues that are at play. So I generally don't encourage people to go after more than 2 buyer personas at once unless you have pretty decently built out marketing team in place, content and events folks in place to be able to go in multiple directions at the same time. But in this particular case, these projects are so large and there's 3 or 4 or 5 different categories of stakeholders that matter most, that I would encourage you to get really clear on, for each particular region that you're going to offer your site selection services, and each particular region where you're going to offer environmental due diligence services, you will likely need a different ideal client profile, a different target account list, and a different set of buyer personas that you need to educate and build trust with. And again, there's the obvious ones, the construction companies, the builders, the developers, the investors. And then there's the less obvious ones, all the community stakeholders, the elected officials, the regulators, the utility companies, and the activists. And each one of those care about different issues. So the question is, like, in order for you to be able to successfully market and sell and win them over, you need to understand how they see the world. And at the intersection of new data center development, what are their biggest goals? What do they need to do individually? What does their team need to get done? What does their organization, what does their company need to accomplish? And what are their biggest challenges? What's driving them nuts individually, as a team, as a company? And the better job you can understand how each of those different stakeholders look at data center development and site selection and environmental due diligence, and the better job you can do at serving as a educational resource around those topics, downloadable content, videos, podcasts, interviews, educational events, educational webinars, educational symposiums, the better job that you can do with consistently showing up in a way that adds value to their professional lives and introduces them to other perspectives, other ways of looking at this that are highly relevant for who they are and where they are in the journey, the more likely it is that you're going to be very, very successful in engaging in a way that helps you educate and build trust with each of those segments. So that's how I would approach it, a high level marketing and selling your site selection and environmental due diligence services, is get really, really clear in each region what an ideal client looks like. In other words, where they're located, how big or how small that company is, what industries, what business models, what verticals they tend to be in, and then build out a very specific target account list that puts a finite definition on your total addressable market. Is it a couple dozen companies? Is it fewer than a couple dozen? Is it a few thousand? It's probably anywhere from a few handfuls to a few dozen in these hyper local contexts of who are at the company level that you want to market and sell to. And then within these companies, who are the most important stakeholders. And I would argue that more than likely there's a construction developer kind of target account list and ICP. There's perhaps a set of 1 or 2 buyer personas at the investor level. And then there's the community activists and the community regulators and the community elected officials, the community utility companies. So you have potentially 5 or 6 different kinds of stakeholders just in what I'm talking through here that are really, really important for you to build relationships with, and for you to have each of those see your team members as the be all end all experts when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center site selection and environmental due diligence services in your local community. And the better job you do with that on an initial and an ongoing basis, you stay with them throughout their full buyer's journey, and potentially these 2 dozen touch points that they'll go through and how they select site selection and how they select environmental due diligence, the better off you're going to be. And just recognize that each of these stakeholders looks at site selection and environmental due diligence a little differently. Some of these stakeholders don't want your data center development project to move forward at all. So yeah, it's really, really important to encapsulate their goals, their challenges, their perspective of how they look at your category, and take that into account with your go-to-market and marketing and sales approach. And this will become a really, really important part of getting your website copywriting done in a way that's empathetic to who they are, what they care about, and where they are in their journey. This will impact your sales enablement materials, your outbound emails, your slides, your educational resources, what you choose to talk about at your own events, what you choose to talk about other people's events, what might go in news releases, everything. The getting the messaging right starts with getting really, really clear on who these ideal clients are, who the different players are on these decision committees, and what's top of mind for them at the intersection of site selection and environmental due diligence. So that's how I would approach marketing and selling data center site selection and environmental due diligence services. And that brings us to our final question for this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A live show. If you've gotten good value so far from this week's show, make sure that you hit the like button. And if you have a topic or a question or a challenge that you think we should address in an upcoming show, in an upcoming episode, please, by all means, include that in the comments wherever you're watching this event. So the final question for this week is, how do we create go-to-market GTM for data center, IT consulting, cybersecurity, and backup recovery? How do we create go-to-market for data center IT consulting, cybersecurity, and backup recovery? So your company operates in the technology part of the data center ecosystem. You know, there's operators. Operators could be some clients for that, or their clients, their tenants within their facilities. There's facilities-related companies, there's construction, real estate, investment kind of companies, and then there's outsourced sales and marketing. So a company that provides data center IT consulting, technology consulting, cybersecurity, and backup recovery could be an operator that's selling these as add-on amenities. But for the most part, this will likely be a technology company that has expertise in consulting, IT services, related consulting, and cybersecurity, and backup and disaster recovery planning, however you want to position that. So the most important part of creating a successful go-to-market for IT consulting, cybersecurity, and backup recovery is more than likely the clients that are hiring your company to do this will have some internal, will have anywhere from no internal IT resources to limited internal IT resources, because this sounds a lot like a managed service provider. This sounds like a lot like a company that's going to provide fractional CTO, fractional data center technology support to companies that have one or more servers, one or more racks, one or more cabinets in data center related facilities. And they may have some internal IT talent, but they don't have enough internal or deep enough internal IT talent to cover all the facilities where they potentially need help with data center related technology and cybersecurity and backup and disaster recovery. So with that in mind, first, you're going to want to define, for your go-to-market, you're going to want to define your ideal client profile. Where are these companies, these prospects, your future clients, where do they tend to be located? Do they tend to be located outside of your geographic region because they don't have an IT professional who can get to the facility within 30 to 60 minutes? If so, that's great to define that, because that will help you get a lot clearer about the geographic targeting with your go-to-market, with your sales and marketing strategy. In addition to geography, as I mentioned a few moments ago, their company size will play a large role in this for two reasons. I often talk about Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold, right? So not too big, not too small. What exactly does that mean for a company that provides outsourced data center technology, consulting, cybersecurity, and backup and disaster recovery? Well, the client needs to be big enough that they can afford your minimums, right? But if they're too big, there's a really good chance that they're doing one or all of these services in-house, or they're looking perhaps for a much, much, much larger integrator, technology solution provider than your company ideally is. And again, I'm making some guesses about the nature of your size and your client size, but the most common sweet spot for a data center consulting firm that specializes in technology, cyber security, and disaster recovery is more than likely a small to mid-sized firm itself that specializes in working with other small to mid-sized firms that don't have a deep bench of IT talent to be able to provide these kind of capabilities internally. So on your ideal client profile, nail down the geography part, nail down the company size, what's just big enough to afford your minimums, but not so large they would do this internally. And then think about if there's industries, if there's vertical markets, if there's business models that are an especially good fit because you have certifications, compliance investments that align with a certain kind of business model at the intersection of data center related needs, or you have them or you don't have them. So that for sure will factor into how you define industry kind of business model targeting in that ideal client profile. From that ideal client profile, you should be able to build out a target account list of anywhere from a couple dozen to more than likely a few hundred, perhaps it may be a few thousand potential clients that would be a great fit for your company's data center IT consulting, cybersecurity, and backup disaster recovery. So we've defined, as part of the go-to-market, we've defined your ideal client profile, and we have a concrete list of companies that could be a great fit for these kinds of services. Now, within these companies, we need to know who's the key kind of person that we need to educate and build trust with, that we need to create, that needs awareness that our company exists, and that allows us to earn trust with them and stay in front of them over time in a way that demonstrates our extreme expertise and our unique differentiated competitive positioning on anything and everything having to do with data center IT consulting, cybersecurity, and backup and disaster recovery for this kind of company in a specific geographic area that's a certain kind of size in a certain kind of industry and a certain kind of job function or job related role or buyer persona. A buyer persona is a semi-fictional representation of an ideal stakeholder that you want to do business with at one of your clients. And buyer personas are based on actual research and some select educated speculation. The actual research is incredibly important because we need to capture their own words of how they describe their biggest goals and their biggest frustrations when it comes to data center technology consulting, cybersecurity, and backup and disaster recovery. And the best way to get their own words is we need to talk directly with them. We can certainly get some input from your longtime client-facing team members about what they think these biggest goals and challenges are and what the segmentation strategy might look like and how to prioritize your primary and your secondary buyer persona. But the overwhelming majority of that research, like 75, 80% of that research, needs to come from actual external research, ideally face-to-face. Second best would be like video interviews. Third best, if you can't get access to any of that, surveys, studying their LinkedIn profiles, studying what shows up in their search and social footprints can be incredibly insightful to help you get consensus around how they describe themselves, the kind of content they interact with, where they hang out online and offline, the skills they're endorsed for, so we can get some consensus in their own words on their biggest goals and challenges. And that consensus and how you bucket that into your primary and your secondary, your first and second most important kind of stakeholders, that's going to be incredibly important to powering everything that you do with your positioning and your messaging going forward. Your website copywriting for sure needs to take that into account. Your website navigation, what goes on the homepage, for sure takes that into account. All of your lead generation offers for sure take that into account. Your email marketing, your social posts, your ads, your offline events, your online events, the titles, the descriptions, the copywriting, the bullet points, the calls to action need to all be extremely heavily influenced by who they are, what they care about, and where they are in their relationship with your company. So that's how to create an effective go-to-market for data center IT consulting, cybersecurity, and backup disaster recovery. From a practical standpoint, I would strongly recommend to leaning heavily into the self-guided buyer's journey. The self-guided buyer's journey means that if we were having this conversation 10 years ago, you had the luxury of your prospects and clients spending about half of their buyer's journey with your company, with a member of your sales team. Back 10 years ago, CEB, Corporate Executive Board, that's now owned by Gartner, did research with Salesforce and SiriusDecisions. And at the time, they found that about 56% of a typical buyer's journey was over before vendor contact, before sales contact. So back then, you still best case scenario, got to spend about 44% of their decision-making process with your best prospects and clients, which wasn't bad. That, unfortunately, is very, very much in the rearview mirror. 10 years of digital transformation, millions of people working from home, baby boomers retiring, more Gen Z and more millennials in decision-making roles, the baby boomers that are still actively working and a number of companies on a part-time and full-time basis have now fully embraced LinkedIn and attending and speaking at webinars and listening and watching and being interviewed on podcasts. They totally get all of this stuff. So because of that, and Alexa and Siri and ChatGPT and all of this immediate gratification answers at our fingertips, 83% of a typical journey is now over before we even have an opportunity to get to meet a prospecting client. In other words, 83% of their researching, comparing options, and evaluating pricing now happens without you being in the room. This is so different than as recently as 10 years ago. So best case scenario, you're only in there for the final 17% of their buyer's journey. Imagine you go to a football game or soccer game or basketball game or hockey or baseball, and for whatever reason, they want to see your business card, they want to see your email signature, they want to see your LinkedIn profile, and they don't like that you're a sales professional. They're really sales allergic. And because of that, they're afraid you're going to overly self-promote yourself and you're going to kind of mess up the vibe in the stadium. So they have this policy and they say, you can't come in till the fourth quarter. You're not allowed in till the eighth inning. 83% of the game needs to be over before we're open to allowing a sales professional into the stadium. You'd say, well, that scenario sounds really ridiculous, right? You bought a ticket, you're sponsoring the game, you've got a suite, whatever it is. But that's exactly what's going on in most B2B technology contexts now, is your buyers have become so sales allergic. They really, really don't want to spend time with members of your client-facing team until they're almost ready to buy. This is an enormous challenge, but it's also a really, really big opportunity for those companies that are able to effectively get in early and often in front of the right people, in the right places at the right time, and most of all, in the right context. A lot of people, though, are getting this really, really wrong. They think the right context is having a bigger booth at the annual conference. The problem with that is that only appeals to people that are in the final 5 to 15% of the buyer's journey and completely ignores everyone that could be a fantastic fit for your company's consulting, cybersecurity, and BDR services in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but isn't ready for that sales conversation today. So how do we get in early and often? Well, we embrace the self-guided, self-driven buyer's journey. We understand that there's going to be 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision. And we get off of our high horse, we get out of the arrogance box, and we say, you know what? We're going to show up where they want us to show up in a way that's meaningful, that provides value to them, in a way that educates and builds trust. We're not going to demand that they elope with us on their first date. We're not going to get overly aggressive when they don't want to take our demo request or take our meeting so we can come in and pitch our services. We're going to show up in a way that positions ourselves in a way that they actually want to spend time with us. And in order to do that, your sales team members are going to need to consider a radical makeover of how they position themselves so they come across more as consultants, teachers, trusted advisors, subject matter experts, and some will even rise to the level of being seen as thought leaders when it comes to anything and everything having to do with data center technology, consulting, cybersecurity, backup, and disaster recovery. When you get that context right and you execute this through educational events, it is a very natural for people to not only want to spend time with members of your client-facing team members because they're learning from them, but it also is a very natural ask to say, hey, Bob, hey, Sue, it's great that you registered for our basics of cybersecurity for data center infrastructure, CTOs, whatever it is of manufacturing companies. But we know that these are major initiatives and it truly takes a village. And there's typically team members involved across finance, compliance, whatever, 3, 4, 5 different roles. This simple email automation that you've been able to do for 20 years, you'd be shocked how few companies are doing this. But it's the simplest thing on the planet. And it's shocking how well it works. And you'll know it's working because you look down at your email event registration confirmations, you look in your CRM, and you're like, cool, 4 or 5 6 different people from the same company just registered for our Lunch and Learn, just registered for our webinars. They're talking about us. And when you get multiple stakeholders from the same company that are attending your educational events, beautiful things start to happen. A lot of the alignment challenges melt away. You're educating and building trust at scale. You're starting to solve transformational challenges that often become a really, really big deal much later in the journey. And you're proactively addressing them in the awareness and the consideration stages of the journey. And because of all of this, you're nearly guaranteeing that your company stays on the short list. In some cases, you're even starting to knock your competitors off of the consideration set because multiple stakeholders from these target accounts are spending time with your team members in a way that they're seeing your client-facing team members as the be-all end-all experts or resource people that are bringing in other experts that are helping them learn and grow together professionally. So that's what it looks like to create an effective go-to-market, an effective GTM for data center, IT consulting, cybersecurity, backup, and disaster recovery in and around the data center ecosystem. So like if your company considers itself a technology consultant or managed service provider, or you're an operator who provides these adjacent kind of services, those are some of the basics that I would lean into to be competitive and add value in a way that makes your target prospects, that makes your best clients actually want to spend time with you, so that you have a successful go-to-market sales and marketing playbook that leans into today's buyer preferences. So that's the final question that I'm going to be addressing in this week's Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A show. If you got good value from this week's episode, make sure that you hit the like button. If you have an idea for a future topic that we should address in an upcoming episode, make sure that you drop that in the comments, and to make sure that you get notified about upcoming educational events and resources just like this, be sure to subscribe to our Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter that comes to your email inbox on Sundays by visiting and subscribing at www.dcsmi.com. I'm Joshua Feinberg from DCSMI, the Data Center Sales and Marketing Institute. If we're not currently connected on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a connect request and mention that you watch the show. And I wish you great success in the coming weeks and in the coming months and in the coming year in growing your influence, growing your team's influence, growing your company's influence in data centers, digital infrastructure, and critical facilities. Look forward to seeing you back again next time. Take care now.
Data Center Go-to-Market Sales and Marketing Q&A is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales marketing and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that's www.dcsmi.com.